The problems facing New Zealand's primary sector have been mounting at a rapid pace. So I think it's time for open hearts and open minds.
Welcome to Sarah's Country. For some of you, this is an appointment time 3 nights a week to kick off the boots and choose to become either frustrated or inspired with the challenges facing the sector that is in the spotlight to fill that $10 billion hole of our collapsed tourism sector. This is the primary sector of New Zealand. Or you could be one of our tens of thousands of listeners on demand who choose to use Sarah's Country as a soundtrack to your workout or the drive to the next appointment. This is your choice to gain clarity on the matters that matter most, to position you for, as I'm told, some great pub chat. I'm your host, Sarah Perriam, and I choose to highlight every walk of life in the primary industry of Aotearoa, New Zealand, our most passionate, that bring to the table a contest of ideas in this changing world. I want to know, is it really still uncertain times anymore, or are we starting to get a bit of a ray of light into the world of a new way of trading with our nations, a new way of approaching environmental challenges collaboratively? Is it here yet, or is it completely not yet? I'd love to know your thoughts. Do we have a choice on how to approach it? Yes, we do. It is all about the loudest getting the say anymore in the movement of quiet thinkers. I don't believe so. I challenge the thought that the vocal are our future. Watching the Netflix documentary Explained, which was a special on the voting system in the US over the weekend, the exponential spend on election campaigns saw Hillary Clinton outspend Trump 1.5 times, and we're talking $1.5 billion. Michael Bloomberg, nearly $1 billion, and didn't even win the Democratic primaries. This is a billionaire who people still don't know who he is. So how do we vote as a consumer in this, or as a country? We actually choose to vote, if you think about it, like with the most logical choice for change. Biden potentially is on the Democratic side. So I ask, are you still winning in this race of life if no one's watching? I believe yes. New Zealand's food and fibre sector continues to build year on year, the value of our exports quietly achieving in the background while the world is in chaos. A quiet, humble, head down, arse up nature may continue to reward us long term. One foot in front of the other to be the most logical choice for consuming for change. But if we continue to nurture all viewpoints, I want to note, not become so divided that we become paralyzed to progress. We need to nurture these quiet achievers. Stephen Hawking is famous for saying, quiet thinkers have the loudest minds. And I want to harness that here on Sarah's Country, one show at a time for all to participate in. And I want you watching live wherever you are across the world and across the multiple platforms that we choose to do this in alliance with the great team at Farmers Weekly. You know the drill, our regulars, in the comments below. I have a fun thing to discuss throughout the show, following a story where one US celebrity is crying out for a Kiwi to marry them so that they can flee the US. This is, of course, the election results may take a few weeks. However, the chaos in the US has seen many want to come to our shores. So, got me thinking, if you could choose one celebrity to sponsor to be a New Zealand citizen, who would it be? And why? I think we're going to get some fantastic comments coming in. I'm going to give it some thought. I'm not going to say Dolly Parton. I know you might think I'm going to. I mean, she's going to be fabulous wherever she lives because she has an incredible attitude to the world. But I'd love to know, who is that one celebrity? They don't have to be from the US. But why would they add value to our country as well? and think about that as we go into the next 24 hours to that result, of course, Trump versus Biden in the US. The reason I've opened up the show about this is there has been a general theme throughout tonight's show of some bright future leaders coming through and a real focus on our attitude towards change. So, starting off, the National Policy Statement for Freshwater has indicated that a minimum standard for our regional councils, bringing into force that every regional council can choose to retrofit these rules. The Horowhenua vegetable growers are not happy about this, and Michelle Sands from Horticulture New Zealand will join us after 7:20. After 7:30, we have some mighty achievers in our sector at all levels that we either put up in lights or we don't. As I explained there, those quiet minds are our loud thinkers, especially from our young. Travelling through Asia this year on a Prime Minister scholarship to being named recently as Massey University's Agricultural Student of the Year, William Robertson will join us after 7:30 on what drives him. Towards the end of the show, our last guest believes as a farming community, we need to be much more open to discussing the pressures we're dealing with and how we can show vulnerability in a way that fits in with our culture. Kane Brisco, Taranaki sharemilker, will tell us how he's used his Farm Fit New Zealand Facebook page to spread this message. But firstly, on the theme of our attitude to our future and navigating challenges of farming the finest food and fibre in the world, we're going to be joined very shortly by Grant McNaughton from the Dasher Station following the recent Farmers Weekly's on-farm story, aptly titled, "Our Attitude is Our Altitude." This is Sarah's Country.
As a farming community, we need to be better at communicating what we do. We're just quietly sitting up here in the hills, respecting the place that we're on and banging on our drums saying we're doing a great job. Doesn't come naturally. That's why you probably don't hear that message so often. What we do is actually looking after the land, because if we exploit it, that's our income out the window. We're Grant and Charlotte McNaughton, farming with our family here at the Dasher Station, north of Otago. The Dasher Station's 6,300 hectares with sheep and beef breeding property. We've got about 12,000 stock units that we winter, about 7,000 sheep and about 700 cattle. Charlotte and I purchased the Dasher in 2012. It was settled in 1919, so it's 100 years old. I've got huge respect for the forebears and the farmers in front of us who have done the hard work. However, also we're thinking the next 100 years ahead. We've worked really hard on incrementally gaining things. We've put in about 20 k's of fencing, improved our fertiliser regime in terms of optimising nutrients in paddocks, regrassing and introducing new genetics to the property. It's great to look back on old photos and see where we've come from and where we've got to. Great things like having the wilding pines gone and having one of the cleanest rivers in all of Otago running right through the centre of the property. This country used to be mountain, beach and totara, so it's quite nice to restore little pockets amongst the farming. To be economically viable allows us to do the best for the land. At the end of the day, our land's our only resource, so we've just got to nurture it and look after it and work to its limitations to be viable for our generation and the next generations.
Here's your gumboot stuff. Oh, you're going to wear those ones?
We've got 3 children. Greer's 6 and twins Fletcher and Matilda are 4. So haven't had much sleep for the last few years. Bringing children up in a rural setting's just amazing. Like, they can hop on the bike with you, come out. They've got pet lambs, pet calves, and just the freedom to roam their farm, which one day will be theirs. Our mission statement's Manaaki Whenua, Manaaki Tangata, caring for the land and caring for the people. It's a long-term game farming. We want to be here for hundreds of years as a family. So if we do those cool things of looking after the land and the people right, it'll repay us in the long term. I think if you follow your passion and what you really enjoy, it's a cliche, but it doesn't really feel like work to us.
In the latest on-farm story for Farmers Weekly, Grant McNaughton's path to farm ownership did not follow the most orthodox route, but it clearly worked. Grant has always been involved in the agricultural world in some form, growing up on a sheep and beef farm in North Otago, then attending Lincoln University, and now today has led to Grant and his wife Charlotte owning the Dasher Station, 6,300 hectare high country pastoral lease property at Karu Hill on the eastern end of the Kakanui Range. This is the border between North Otago and Central Otago. The reason I wanted to reach out to Grant, of course, a fantastic on-farm story, is about the current environment that we farm and grow in, following, of course, the latest election result and where the next 3 years go. But in particular, what caught me was his quote from his on-farm story video. You can check out at farmersweekly.co.nz, and if you were just watching, you would have seen. Our attitude determines our altitude. This is the quote that stood out for me the most. Now, we are joined by Grant. Evening, Grant. I want to sort of take our listeners and viewers on a bit of a journey and from Waitaki Boys in Oamaru, but there must have been multiple major influential people along your journey to shape your attitude and your approach to challenges. That's sort of where I'd like you to start.
Yeah, definitely, Sarah. Thanks for having us along. We've always tried to align ourselves with great people that have been inspirational and helped mentor us along the way. So everyone's played their little bit, but it's certainly been a long-term goal to be owning our own farm. And just I think we owe to everyone to have an attitude of a glass half full and half empty in essentially, especially the environment we're in at the moment. So it's just being positive about it and sticking to those goals and working forward. What
do you mean by the quote, your attitude is your altitude?
Well, I think as farmers we can definitely have the conversation of collectively, it's too dry, it's too wet, and really we can't control those things. So it's about what we can control, and one thing we can control is our attitude. So as long as we've got a positive attitude, you wake up in the morning and the day's always going to be a hang of a lot more positive if you've got a positive attitude about it, as opposed to it's going to be a terrible day. And I think in the current world with mental health is such a big issue, we've actually got to put that foremost and forefront for everyone.
Okay, so we're talking about dealing with change, and change is coming down the barrel at farmers and growers here in New Zealand with a lot of regulation change, in particular fresh water. When you're having conversations, I believe strongly that it's an attitude, not an age thing, and that there's a lot of people that are our age, Grant, that are poles apart, and there's people with attitudes in their 60s and 70s that are poles apart. So therefore, when you do have friends of all ages in the farming sector, how do you actually sit down with them and go, you know what, there is another way that we can see this and approach it, and particularly when the bank's knocking on your door?
Yeah, I think it's about everyone doing their own little bit. Understandably, there's people out there that probably are doing a really bad job, and people that are doing an exceptional job. So I think it's actually about not lifting the bar, but raising the floor in terms of how everyone handles their bit on farm. So I think you've actually got to look inwards before you look outwards. So you've got to look at yourself and your own business. And Charlotte and I do this all the time, looking at what we're doing first before we can blame someone else. So I think if we all do our own little bit and make those incremental gains as an industry, we'll move forward immensely.
can you speak us through the Dasher Station pastoral lease has got its own challenges as opposed to freehold. So what have you been able to control to enhance the environment on farms since you've taken over?
We've just tried to do the basics, Sarah. We've really just looked at our fertiliser program, subdivision, our stocking policies, and just chipped away at doing the basics of farming, feeding our stock well. We've got a couple of core philosophies we guide our principles by: Manaaki Whenua, Manaaki Tangata. So looking after the land, looking after the people. And we feel if we do that, it'll repay itself to us. So just trying to be a good custodian in the land. And so far, so good. The bank hasn't chased us off yet.
Let's talk about this, in terms of you have previously worked for Ravensdown, and from the learnings from those days to where they are now, what I'd like to ask is, you've been in that position of working alongside farmers and guiding them with change to being on the other foot. How does the rural service supply industry support farmers through these changes?
Yeah, I think the rural service supply has got a huge role to play. Definitely it's a relationship business, farming with our suppliers, and I think we've just got to work alongside them. They've got to provide us with some sort of expertise and guidance, and along with our levy payers, our beef and lambs, dairy NZs, I think they've really got to step up to the plate and be accountable for our levies that we're paying to them, because essentially that's where we need to see the R&D, because it's a most important part of our business going forward and our licence to operate.
I do want to talk to you about that in particular. I saw a press release came through today, an extreme dry toolkit from Beef and Lamb New Zealand. A lot of last season was critical of who making very tough decisions and encouraging to do that earlier. The current framework of our industry, though, makes it extremely hard to quit when there's so many uncertainties. What would your advice be to farmers, particularly farming in an environment like North Otago on the boundary of Central Otago?
Yeah, I think everyone knows their farming system best, but for us, we always have options to go to. And we'll have set dates in the calendar where if it hasn't rained by X, we'll make a decision and we'll move on. So I think it's actually setting a time frame, setting priorities, and then making that decision and sticking with it. And as soon as you've made that decision, put the paper in the drawer and just move on. Because that's an attitude thing. Because if you start dwelling on it and say, I've lost money or I've made a bad decision or it's rained the next day, you're always looking in the rear vision mirror and not looking at the front windscreen, which in my opinion comes back to that attitude comment. That's where we need to be looking. We just need to keep looking forward.
Would love to close on our attitude as an industry to a large democratic process that happened, which was our election, where society decided the current government in an unprecedented result, signalling to the industry what they want. How does it feel when there is talk that the rural community did so to vote out the Greens, yet there is 10 plus 2 ministerial portfolios to keep them there at the table? How do you feel? It's not like you're about to retire out of the industry. This is the next 20, 30 years and further on as well in your next generation. Is this a signal that this is here to stay?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question, Sarah. I think you've just got to look at the past to look to the future. And there's been changes for the last 20, 40, 60 years. Go back to the 80s and look at how farming's innovated through it. So I think we've just got to look at ourselves and look at how we can innovate, how we can be smarter and work with the changes. And at the end of the day, there's going to be stuff that we're not going to like, but we're just going to have to adapt. But I just hope as a country, we don't become a country of can't do's. The old number 8 wild mentality of New Zealand was we can do it, we can get through it. And we just don't want to change our psyche to that negative mindset again of we can't do it. So I think as long as we're positive, we'll punch through and out the other side.
Oh, if we've got role models in the industry like you, Grant, we certainly will be able to keep that attitude at the forefront to alleviate us to higher altitudes. check it out, the latest on-farm story on farmersweekly.co.nz. Of course, you can search and follow those on-farm stories, beautifully produced by Ash there, who travels around the country sharing the wonderful stories, which I need to let you know are broadcast within our schools around this country as an amazing resource as well. And when you've got role models like Grant and Charlotte McNaughton at the Dasher station speaking the way that they do, it's very inspirational, so check it out. Up next on the show, we have Michelle Sands, the Natural Resources and Environment Manager for Horticulture New Zealand. She's not happy. She believes that vegetable growers in the Horowhenua are at a disadvantage under the Horizons Regional Council's implementation of the National Freshwater Policy Statement. Michelle will be with us very shortly here on Sarah's Country. This is Sarah's Country.
Delicious. Ever wondered where it starts? Does it start with care? Respect. Fresh grass 365 days a year. The truth is, delicious doesn't start in a single moment or with a single ingredient. Delicious starts here.
Fantastic to see our regulars joining us live in the comments below. And of course, how fantastic was Grant McNaughton there. Kate Taylor, former New Zealand Young Farmer of the Year, right there. I believe it was 2010. Kate, am I correct? Grant McNaughton took home that title. We have Uncle Grant here, Uncle Grant, my apologies, Uncle Doug here with us tonight. Go Grant and Charlotte, an awesome pair, a finalist also in the Xander McDonald Award. You would have remembered we had young Jack on the show, and what an inspiration he was as well. One part that I absolutely love about Sarah's Country is highlighting not only the achievements, but the thinking of these future leaders and current leaders, regardless of the age really. And, in terms of leadership, the man who has led New Zealand's vulnerability forward, Uncle Doug, says you can't move forward if you don't accept vulnerability. Stick around to watch the end of, or listen to the end of the show, where we will be continuing on this theme with Kane Brisco, brought to us by Farm Strong and his Farm Fit Facebook page. It's fantastic. Cynthia Kane, well done, Grant. Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic to see all of you who are watching live with us along here tonight. Mark Cheeseman, one of the best. Fantastic. One thing I do want to hear, having a little bit of fun, and this is poking the fun at the US elections. There is one celebrity I've never heard of. The star of Two Broke Girls, Kat Dennings, has declared her desire to become a New Zealand citizen, appealing to a Kiwi to marry her to help her get out of the country. Honestly, it's going to be something, isn't it, in terms of immigration south because of and wanting citizenship here in this country. I'd love to know if we were to let in one of your favourite celebrities. I mean, they don't have to really be an actor or a musician. It could be one of the brightest minds from around the world. It doesn't necessarily have to be the US. Why would you let them in? What type of people do we want if we are going to allow in migration? Is it just going to be the billionaires who knock on our door with their private jets? Or are we able to bring in a diverse range of thinking when we understand how our borders will look into the future? Getting into our second guest of this evening is reported by journalist Colin Williscroft. In this week's Farmers Weekly, commercial vegetable growers in the Horowhenua say they are disadvantaged by being treated the same as pastoral farmers under regional council regulations aimed at improving water quality. Now, the region's growers and Horticulture New Zealand are among those who have presented submissions to a panel considering horizons in the Manawatu-Wanganui Regional Council's proposed plan change too. Horticulture New Zealand Natural Resources and Environment Manager Michelle Sands joins us now to explain more about this. Michelle, why particularly is Horowhenua growers feeling they are being singled out?
Yeah, so the One Plan, which is the regional planning framework for the Horizons region, it has a method in it where they looked at the grass curve and the land use capability of land, and they used that as an indicator of the how productive farming should be and applied it to all land uses in the region. But then they specifically targeted places with water quality issues, including the Horowhenua, and sought that all farmers and growers operate within those kind of numeric limits. But the issue for vegetable growers is that essentially they're not growing grass and their systems are really different. And so they are very productive, but they're quite small systems, and they grow a lot of food, but they aren't able to really be compared with the nitrogen leaching rates that you might achieve on the same piece of land had it been used for dairy farming or sheep and beef farming.
Isn't vegetable growing a higher nitrate leaching per hectare of land use in comparison to other types of land use?
It can be. It depends on the vegetable rotation. So in the Horizons region, there are potato rotations that grow integrated with pasture. You find them in the Manawatu and Opaki, or up in Awakuni where they grow root vegetables like carrots. They're really integrated with sheep and beef farming, and some of those rotations they'll be 8 years in pasture and just 1 or 2 years in vegetables. But in Horowhenua, they grow really important for New Zealand's domestic food supply. They grow vegetables all year round, and they grow green vegetables. And those vegetables are grown in continuous rotations with other vegetables. Sometimes they might have a cover crop or a small phase of pasture, but really they are growing vegetables continuously. And so whilst they may have a higher kilograms per hectare nitrogen leaching, they're actually the most efficient user of nitrogen if you were to compare it for nitrogen per tonne of food produced. For example. So it's just a very different growing system, and it has different good management practices, and we think that the rules need to kind of recognise that and really encourage growers to be implementing precision horticulture techniques so they really are reducing their footprint, but to ensure those rules are achievable and workable for vegetable growers.
Okay, so Horticulture New Zealand has been working alongside growers in the area on submissions. What were some of those key messages in your submissions that you really wanted to see change on?
Yeah, I think one of the key things is this particular plan that Horizons is working on at the moment is really just a transitional plan. And what we all agree is that there needs to be a real community vision for Horowhenua where everybody comes together and tries to think about what will be needed to achieve water quality improvements for the lake, because we recognise that that's really important. But it isn't, the problem won't be solved by singling out vegetable growers, because it will require all of the landowners in that catchment, all of the farmers and the urban part of Levin to work together. And the solution won't just be about achieving best farming practices, although that will be part of the solution and is part of the solution, but there will be more in that Horowhenua catchment, because the lake itself has lost its wetlands, for example. So it's very, it's been highly modified. So some part of the solution has to be focused on restoration as well.
So we have a continuation of Minister David Parker in his portfolio, who wants to reform the RMA to effectively put the environment above all else, and that is people and how it feeds itself and its economy. How do you work with that?
Yeah, I think that the concept of Te Mana o Te Wai does sets up a hierarchy of obligations where the water's first and next is the human health and after that is the social and economy. But I think that we have to recognise that all of those things are really integrated as well. So, vegetables are really important for human health, but they need water as well, and they do have impacts. But underpinning our, I suppose, health and well-being is a healthy environment. So we have to try and find a way of working on the solution together, and it's not as simple, I suppose, as thinking that the problem can be solved by just the vegetable growers, being forced out of business.
Yeah, here in Canterbury, I know vegetable growers that are also livestock farmers here in like the Pendarvis area, south of Lincoln, and the multi-land use movement. Back to the way that we used to. Do monoculture and vegetable growing communities see a change in being not just a vegetable farmer?
Yeah, there's different sorts of rotations. So there are definitely, monoculture and vegetable rotations is really uncommon. So in Levin, a very complex rotation. Some of those greens growers will grow 20 or more vegetables in their rotation. And their rotations are kind of descend from a kind of a Chinese tradition where they have less likely to have livestock in their rotations, but are really have the plant residue is really important. But other vegetables, particularly root vegetables, or in other parts of New Zealand like Canterbury and Hawke's Bay, Horowhenua, animals are a really important part of the rotation. And actually, they are important for improving soil health. And I think that we do need to look at the best use of land that we can.
What are some of the best practice around New Zealand that you have seen where precision agriculture is really coming into its own and actually working alongside regional councils very much in unison and collaboratively?
Yeah, well, actually, one of the recent research projects there have been recent research projects in Levin, and the regional council has been involved with funding those. And one of the things that's, in some ways it's quite simple, but it's been making a real difference is quick nitrogen testing of the soil. So what the growers are starting to do is to, instead of just doing maybe annual or testing their soils once or twice a year, to testing them very frequently, every time before they're planting vegetables, so they can understand how much what the nutrients are in the soil at the time that they're planting, and then they can match the fertilizer more accurately. So that's just really new research that's been developed by Plant and Food and has been taken up recently.
Thank you so much, Michelle Sands there from Horticulture New Zealand, following a story in this week's Farmers Weekly. Now coming up, the Robertson family are quietly spoken high achievers in our food and fibre sector here in New Zealand. We're going to be joined by William Robertson, who's recently won the Massey University Agricultural Student of the Year after a Prime Minister scholarship travelling through Asia whilst playing in an under-21 rugby team. Our sector is on a fantastic trajectory when we celebrate young leadership, but are we ready to continue to nurture this type of talent? William's going to explain his desires for the future up next.
This is Sarah's Country.
The recipe for perfect beef and lamb. Take one small fresh country. Make sure it's nice and remote. Now, keep it at the ideal temperature all year round. Next, mix in the farmers. They go perfectly with the nature of this unique place. Add regular sprinkles of rain to really bring out the lush meadow grass. Then let your animals happily graze on this grass all day, every day. have it. New Zealand. The perfect recipe for beef and lamb. Taste pure nature.
Oh, wonderful.
This
Cynthia,
is
thank you
Sarah.
so much for commenting on behalf of Jeff Kane, a Waitaki boy who used to visit the Dasher with Doug Kane. It's fantastic to have you watching along with us live here on Sarah's Country, wherever you are tuning in around the world, and I mean that. We certainly, I got some messages over the weekend that we have listeners from San Francisco to Scotland, you name it, South Africa, and we absolutely value you taking the time to listen in to the matters that matter most to farming, food and fibre in New Zealand. I mean, we want to pride ourselves as the most sustainable and the highest achievers. That's a little island at the bottom of the world. We've been overachieving in a very quiet and humble way for decades and generations. As Farmers Weekly's newsmaker this week highlights just that. Massey University Agriculture Student of the Year, William Robertson, has had a massive 12 months, capped off with that award, something we should all be extremely proud of as a bright future leader of our sector. This time last year, William was about halfway through a 6-month stint studying at Shanghai University in China, something he says was an eye-opening experience, and the decision was something that was last minute. William is also the chair of the Massey University Young Farmers Club and served as an agricultural liaison officer on the Massey Horticulture Society. Our last guest, Michelle, will be proud of that. And William joins us now, I understand, from the Massey University Library. Ahead of your last exam, William, what is your last exam?
So my last exam is called Agri-Food Strategies, and it's basically about different strategies you take when sort of selling New Zealand products all over the world, say if you're going to enter South Asia versus South Africa. So yeah, really interesting paper.
Fantastic. I'm sure this last stint in Shanghai University in China would certainly see you absolutely ace this exam. Can you explain about your journey there and some of the eye-opening experiences you did have?
Yeah, so like you said in the little introduction, it was a bit of a last-minute decision. I was fortunate to travel a bit of Southeast Asia earlier in 2019. So very start of 2019, travelled around Vietnam, Thailand and Singapore, and that was the first time I'd ever seen anything close to what Asia's like, and it was a completely different experience and really got me that travel bug. And so basically came back from that, walked straight into the exchange office at Massey University and said, look, sir, how do I do one of these exchanges? I really want to go to this China. What do I have to do to fill out the paperwork? And yeah, so China was sort of the big one for me. I think I grew up on a dairy farm, so most of the dairy goes over to China, and you never really know what happens sort of once it leaves the port. You've got a good idea of what we do in New Zealand, but as long as it gets sold over in China, you're not really sure, and as long as the payouts are right, you're kind of happy. But sort of really wanted to know what happens on the other side of the supply chain and seeing what happens over there. So yeah, jumped on a plane, didn't speak a lick of Mandarin, so that was interesting. But yeah, sort of jumped in head first and tried to make the most of it as I could.
I'd really love to know, from the eyes of a young dairy farmer's son, what were some of those misconceptions that you had about the Chinese market, and what are the fundamental things they actually care about as a consumer?
Yeah. So the one thing that shocked me in the first day was Shanghai is high tech. Don't let anyone tell you that China's sort of this developing country that hasn't got the technology. There is a lot of disparity between sort of the regional rural areas, but there's also massive technology over there, and it's crazy to see some of the scale that they have in their top tier cities. So that was one sort of off the plane, seeing skyscraper after skyscraper was a big one. And And then once you settle in and you start staying there for a couple of months, you shop at the supermarkets, you shop at the wet markets, you sort of speak to people, you start seeing that sort of the trends and what they value. And every time you say you're from New Zealand, dairy's sort of the first one that props up, which is pretty cool, pretty humbling. And it's always that clean green image. If they know where New Zealand is, or if they know of New Zealand, it's always that clean green image, happy cows, happy sheep running around, rolling hills, like high mountains. That's what they picture, which that's sort of what we're trying to sell down in the small little corner. So it's pretty nice to know that on ground over in China, they do recognise that and they really appreciate it. They love the story. So good bit of getting across.
Did it completely change for you what pathway you'd taken our industry after having that lens?
I wouldn't say it changed it. I'd say I didn't have much of a pathway to begin with. I was sort of playing it as I went. I was open to a lot of opportunities and was sort of trying to figure out where I wanted to go and what really spun my wheels. And head first, definitely said, look, this is where you want to go. This is what interests you. And so it sort of gave me a bit of clarity of what I want to get into and what makes me proud to be in the primary industries, which is really cool to be.
I mentioned there as in the introduction, Lincoln University and Massey University have been announcing a lot of job cuts, and we talk consistently on this industry about how we're going to attract talent like yourself, William, into this industry. Are our institutions and our pathways into the primary sector archaic, and what do we need to do to attract more, do you believe?
I think the big issue that comes down to it is that sort of challenge of getting information that's out there and getting it to the right people. For example, a business might have an amazing job opportunity that over the summer they're going to let you investigate your own research project into some sort of primary industry or some sort of challenge. But if you don't know about it, you'll never sort of get excited about it. You'll never get stuck into it. And there are these opportunities out there. We've got them galore in the primary industries, and some of them are really crazy and really interesting to be a part of. But I think it's that connection of distributing that information through universities, through channels such as this, where you say, this is what's out there. Jump in head first or have a go. Even if you're hesitant, just get involved. I think that's the way we'll go.
There's a bit of a theme that I set up at the start and throughout our guests tonight, that we are such quiet, humble achievers in this country, and with that, quiet communicators as well. How do we stand on the shoulders of the generations before us to ensure that the primary sector continues to flourish?
I think it's sort of just looking at the facts. I think facts don't lie, and when you look at them, they're pretty compelling. So when you see sort of some of our production figures of how many people we feed in a small country, or if you look at the environmental side, how efficient some of our production systems are when compared to other countries in the world, that's sort of one of the ways that you say, look, we're doing a bloody good job of what we're doing, and that's something to be proud of. And if you can sort of line up a lot of those facts and figures, no matter how humble you are, the facts don't lie, and sort of that the story tells itself once you get it all aligned.
And I'm sure coming home, taking out the Massey University Agricultural Student of the Year would be just an incredible way to end what for many around the world has been quite a shite one. How important is it to take out that award?
Yeah, the award was an awesome feeling, especially sort of how close-knit our school is, the School of Agriculture at Massey. You know all of your classmates, and you're always talking to each other about assignments or lectures or where they're from, or you get to know each other really well. So sort of being recognised by your peers is in the awards really humbling, but also knowing that there's a lot of other top-tier students that any day of the week they could get that award, and no one would bat an eyelid because there's such quality students. So yeah, I think that was the big one, sort of looking at my mates and being like, look, it was me today, but you guys any of you, it could be tomorrow. So that's a pretty cool place to be in.
And we will all go out into the industry, head down, bum up, and with great integrity, quietly achieving as we do as Kiwis. Thank you so much, William Robertson, as I said, the Massey University Agricultural Student of the Year, and we have to let him get away to finish off the study for his last exam of his degree tomorrow. So he's hoping he'll pass with flying colours, I'm sure. Coming up after the break, where are we on the show? Farmers Under Pressure is what... lastly on the show, Farmers Under Pressure is they withdraw into themselves. And our next guest knows this well. He did it himself. Kane Brisco, South Taranaki sharemilker, has an agenda to get farm fit. And this goes far beyond what you can bench press.
This is Sarah's Country.
Growing a better world takes courage. It takes foresight and vision. It's about dreaming big, then being brave enough to follow that dream through. To create a world where food is plentiful, soils are healthy, and rivers run crystal clear. A world where we grow more with less, where livestock is tended to with care. Energy is friend, not foe, and waste is a valuable resource. This is the world you're already shaping through imagination, innovation, and determination. So as small steps become huge leaps, you move boldly forward. And Rabobank is there beside you to help grow a better world together.
Every morning, Kiwi farmers wake up to produce high quality food. Yet, every night, some Kiwi families are going to sleep hungry. Meet the Need is a charity founded by farmers, and it's here to change all that. We're about New Zealand farmers feeding New Zealand families by donating a small part of what we grow when we can. You can help us make sure no one in New Zealand goes to sleep hungry again. Visit meettheneed.org and follow us on social.
I actually thought over that break it would be Matthew McConaughey that I would import. Potentially could marry him for a visa. He's just an incredibly intelligent man when it comes to emotional intelligence. And new book out, I am really looking forward to reading. But he's funny. He's definitely very, very funny. I've been talking about this because there's this mad US celebrity on Twitter saying, where is the Kiwi men that will marry me so I can get out of this nutty country? What celebrity would you import into New Zealand and why? A bit of fun in the comments wherever you are watching along live. But of course, we do have to go to our last guest of this evening and on the theme of inspiring young rural New Zealanders. In this week's Farmers Weekly, the inspiring story this week from Farmstrong is on Kane Brisco. Kane is in his 7th year, 50-50 share milking at Ohungai near Hara in South Taranaki, and he started his own social media page to get farmers talking. Kane says the need for more transparency when it comes to talking about the daily pressures of farming is what motivated him to create the Farm Fit New Zealand page and to start the conversation. Kane joins us now. Kane, welcome. You're quoted as saying we need to get better as a community at genuinely finding out how people are doing. But Kiwis, in particular farming Kiwis, let's be honest, as we've been talking tonight, quiet achievers, yeah, good is pretty suffice for most. How do we actually crack that?
Well, it comes down to, I guess, the average farmer is getting that courage to more or less pop their nuts out their guts and be honest with themselves firstly about how they are and how they're doing, accepting that and recognising it, and then being honest with their mates or their family or whoever's in their support network. We've got the old yeah, nah, good answer for just about everything, and that does no one any favours. So it's up to not just industry leaders. We've got Farm Strong and the Mike Kings and the Tangaroa Walkers of the world talking about it and starting that conversation. But it takes the everyday guy next door to actually give an honest answer when he gets asked how he is or what's going on, or it's that simple. And that changes the whole atmosphere about how people talk to each other, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, especially when there's relatability. And you're a dairy farmer, you're filming these videos from the cabbie tractor or from the milking shed, and people can relate. What has the journey been like since that very first video you've put up and the feedback that you've got?
Scary. The whole journey's been scary because I am that average, typical farming caveman type bloke. So for me to stick my beak on the bloody camera is pretty nerve-wracking, and like the whole thing's just been about, if something I say or my vulnerability helps one person, then it's worth it. And that's sort of how I G myself up before any video or anything. But yeah, there's been a massive response really over the last couple of years. I get all sorts of messages from guys and girls about, talking about their challenges and what they've been through. And I guess importantly for me is what I'm doing is helping them or those that they know around them, which is, that's the rewarding part of it, I guess. But, it goes to show, like, I've had, messages from all walks of life, not just farmers. It's all sorts, and, from farm workers and even high school students right up to the older generation have actually messaged me and shared their stories with me, which is really humbling.
Now, the Facebook page is Farm Fit New Zealand, and I mean, farming is physically challenging, but your point of difference is, the one thing that you really do focus on strongly, I must say, is that physical activity is actually a way to unwind after doing physical activity all day.
Yeah, 100%. So I've been lucky enough to play a lot of sports throughout my farming career. And I know how helpful it's been through whatever challenges life has thrown at me. A part of that is having those transferable skills. So you can learn a lot from, particularly team sports or individual sports, that you can transfer some of those skills and understandings into real life situations. And the other part of that is, I guess, getting out off the farm. Most farmers need a reason to get off and get away and get off the farm. So using sport or training or exercise is a great way to do that. And, it gives you that mental refresh when you go away from farming and you're concentrating on something. There's not that clutter in your head. You can't think about farming while you're boxing or doing an intense workout. You've got to be focused on that. So I always found that gave me a real mental refresh. It gets the endorphins going, it picks you up, you feel a bit better, and you start creating new ideas in your head and new ways to approach whatever's going on in life.
And the stresses are many if we allow them to mount on top of us as well. And in my introduction, your quote was that the natural reaction is to withdraw. What was your journey to now?
Yeah, I guess I've had several journeys, several different challenges in life, some of them outside of farming and some of them inside. But I know when I guess the times I've struggled on farm and been under a lot of pressure and particularly those challenges you can't necessarily control. You can't control the weather or how much you're getting paid for some of your stuff, and those things mount up. You tend to work harder to try and fix it. And you tend to spend more time on the farm. You feel a little bit helpless, so you work harder and try and do all these things. You sacrifice your life just about to try and defeat these challenges you can't control. So I think that's pretty relatable to most farmers, and if they haven't come across that, they probably will in their farming career. So, and that's what we do. We put on the mask and we put our heads down and our asses up, and we work and we try and work our way out of the situation. But we've got to realise sometimes you can't work yourself out of those things, and in fact that's more detrimental than positive. So we've got to actually be able to have, I guess, the foresight and the acknowledgement of what the challenges are in front of us, to step back and say, how can I approach this differently? Sometimes, taking that bird's eye view can really help, put some clarity on what you're dealing with and some of those challenges, and provide a bit of perspective. So, yeah, no, I've definitely been in that space where I've not left the farm for 2 or 3 months and just put my head down and not talk to anyone, and typically not reached out for help or advice or anything like that. So, if you haven't been there, you probably will one day. So I'm of the feeling that we should be proactive about trying to do things when we are feeling better to help when we are, I guess, in a position where we're more likely to withdraw or put that mask on. So, that's what I've learned from that.
And there's so many comparisons to farm management versus how we manage ourselves and our own well-being, that we could actually have some correlation between the two, because we certainly don't do that to our farm. Why do we do that to ourselves?
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's simple. We're so proactive with how we manage our farms. We cut silage when there's excess pasture. We make hay when the sun shines. We plant crops for droughts and for winter. And I don't know what it is, but we don't take that philosophy onto ourselves. It's so simple when you step back and think about it. It's like, why aren't we proactive with our own health? And I think it partly comes down to maybe we're probably worried about what that looks like to other people around us, perhaps. I had a message from a guy actually not long, a couple of weeks ago, he's worried about being seen as lazy if he gets off the farm once or twice a week to go and do something for himself. There's that stigma, certainly when I was growing up, farmers work hard. That's part of our culture, I guess, is our work ethic. And we don't want to be seen to, God forbid, put ourselves before the cows or put ourselves before the land, because that would be seen as not caring. But I think, we've got to take a new approach to that. And my sort of thing is, we are the most valuable asset in our business or on our farm. Without us, the machine stops. So when you're the most important cog in the wheel, you better oil the bloody thing, because, if you don't, it breaks down.
Kane, I do have to say, though, I have actually noticed a real stigma change in the last couple of years. And dairy farmers that proudly say, I have a 5 and 2 roster, my staff get every second weekend off. I only milk once a month as the boss. Yeah. It's a badge of honour now that is a statement that you've got your shit together.
Yeah, and we are starting to see that. But I can tell you from some of the conversations I've had that it's a long way from being the norm, unfortunately. There are, I talked to someone not long ago that hadn't had a day off for 4 years. And I'm like, Jesus, mate, I wouldn't be doing it. It's still a massive badge of honour to say I haven't had a day off for a year or whatever. It's seen as it's like scoring the winning try in rugby, to win the bloody grand final. There's that correlation between success and not having a day off or something like that. So we are starting to see a change, I guess, with my generation and the ones coming through. But there's still needs to be a massive shift in how we see our role as farmers. And at the end of the day, we've all got families too. So, we've got to see ourselves as family men or women, however that looks. But, just making some, I guess, steps towards making yourself a priority is really important.
I wonder how many funeral speeches included that he worked every day for 4 years.
Exactly, and it's and I was like that. I've been through periods where I haven't had time off for a long time. In fact, I've never had a every second weekend roster in my life. So I can put my hand up and say I'm part of that problem. But it's something I'm working on, and it's something we include in our budget now to have regular time off. But yeah, exactly. It's so silly when you step back and think about it like that. We've just got this caveman brain that does things stupid sometimes. I don't know what it is, but it seems silly when you step back and put it like that, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Farming is a very emotional sport, Kane. Thank you so much for joining us here on Serious Country. Absolute privilege to have you on the show finally. Kane Brisco, a real inspiration there with the Farm Fit New Zealand Facebook page and this week's Farm Strong feature in Farmers Weekly. There was a lot of farms in that. I just have to end with something that my mum always says, and I'll refrain from swearing. When we used to say to her, "No, we're fine, woman, no, we're fine. She'd say, "Do you know what FINE stands for? Effed, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. Are you still fine?" You've got nothing when she says that to you. Wise woman, Bronnie. Absolute privilege to have you with us live and on demand across the world on podcast and on video broadcast in alliance with the great team at Farmers Weekly. Tomorrow's show, absolutely fantastic. Last one of the week. We're going to be talking about the Growers Leading Change funding, $2.5 million from MPI into Foundation for Arable Research. This is to extend information into the arable industry with Anna Hislop. The 2021 Nuffield Scholars are being announced tonight in Wellington. CEO for Rural Leaders, Chris Parsons, is going to share who and how. This is the part I want to know. They're going to see out their scholarship in a COVID environment, restricting the global travel that they normally do. And of course, I love chatting to Chris about his thoughts on leadership, especially in our sector through change. New Zealand deer velvet products are enjoying strong underlying consumer demand, I am told, despite the opposing factors that have been influencing prices in the 2020 season. Rhys Griffiths from Deer Industry New Zealand will be with us with the latest, and we will have new Minister for Conservation, Kiri Allen, on the show. We're going to get her lens on how farming, hunting and conservation will look over the next 3 years. In the meantime, thank you so much for joining us. For all the details, head to seriouscountry.com, and we'll see you back here live at 7 p.m. In the meantime, good night and go well.
This is Sarah's Country.